What's up? This is Barton Simmons for Barton and Bud, along with Bud Elliott of Barton and Bud. We are here on Sunday night. You are listening to us on Monday, maybe later. But whenever you're listening to us, you have no doubt heard the news that the coaching carousel is spinning. We have got our first big time Power 5 coaching move, but we've seen it. We've seen a couple decisions take place at Southern Miss, and who's the other one that's open right now? Utah State.
Yep.
And now we got sort of a domino, and Will Muschamp off the board at South Carolina. After a 59-42 loss to Ole Miss over the weekend. So we'll get into that. We'll talk about some of the observations we had over the weekend. But I don't know, Bud. Feels like big news that we're popping off with off the jump here on Sunday evening.
It does, Barton, because I think there are a lot of schools out there, right, who maybe didn't want to fire a coach during a pandemic. I mean, South Carolina is going to have, a $59 million loss in the athletic department this year, I think I read. And yet if they're willing to do it, I think other schools might as well. Maybe not everybody. I still think we'll have a little bit lighter of a carousel compared to normal. But, I mean, look, man, like that's a pretty big deal. To have an SEC job open that's not a Vanderbilt, that's not, a Mississippi State. And Will Muschamp, what did he go? 3 bowls in 4 years. This year, I guess they were bowl eligible, but I don't know really who was going to pick them, to come to their bowl since everybody is bowl eligible. Sub 500 record there out South Carolina, 6-7, 9-4, 7-6, 4-8, and then this year, obviously off to a really bad start as well. And like ultimately, they did get torched on defense in this last game, and they've had some games this year where they've given up a lot of points. But the overall issue with Muschamp's teams throughout his entire career has been has been the offense. They just can't score points reliably. And it is kind of ironic to me that the game that got him fired, like the final straw, was the team being unable to do the thing that he was actually known for. So I'm interested to kind of hear your thoughts. Like, do you think this firing was justified? I know I've been kind of like, let's not fire anybody during COVID unless what they're doing matches up with the reason you would have fired him pre-COVID,
Right. Yeah. I mean, I did. So I touched on this on the Cover 3 pod, and I'll regurgitate it a little bit because I think it's relevant. I mentioned this before. I had any inclination that Will Muschamp was about to get fired. But I kind of made and I had Muschamp in mind in part when I was talking about this, but I talked about the idea of like, this is very much a mulligan season. This is a season in which like no one really, it's unfair to judge everybody because we don't know what kind of COVID issues they're dealing with. We don't know what kind of, what kind of buy-in they've got from their team through all this, what kind of personal issues they may be dealing with. Like who knows? Like it's a mess. There was no spring practice, like different varying levels of spring practice. And so everyone really should just get a gimme. But you can't actually, like in reality, like it's different than in theory. And in reality is what's their record right now? 2-4, 2-5.
Yeah.
2-5. Like that is a real record that represents real domination, that represents real discouragement from recruits, that represents real apathy from a fan base, that represents a lot of things that are really happening, and you can't just call it a mulligan. And so I think the further we get into this season and the more some of these win-loss records start to go south, I think the idea that it's going to be just a conference-only slate and that, everything should be sort of judged on a curve, I think that's going to get thrown out the window when you're losing by 30 and when the team starts to quit on you and when the fan base starts to turn and like all these pressures start to mount that are real, and the recruiting implications and fundraising implications and everything, like whatever your financial situation is at your school of choice, it's going to be worse if people like start shutting down the checkbook because they hate the head coach, like whatever it is. And so like that, as this has now happened, and as Will Muschamp has now been fired, and that's the first, again, kind of Power 5 domino has fallen, I wouldn't be surprised at all if suddenly all this talk about quiet season, quiet carousel, no one's got the stomach to make a move like this, the optics are bad, the finances aren't there. It wouldn't shock me. I'm not saying I expect this, but it wouldn't shock me if suddenly there's a normalcy to this, the seal has been broken, and now everyone's like, you know what? I don't want to be the one that like held on too long, that missed my chance, that missed my window, that didn't get an opportunity when the pickings were ripe this cycle for that right head coach. South Carolina's got free reign right now. They can pick whoever the hell they want. They want Hugh Freeze, they go get them. You know, they want to take a swing at Matt Campbell or whoever the hot name is, take a swing. They're uncontested right now. And I wouldn't be surprised at all if now that they've made the move, that suddenly like the other AD that didn't quite have the stomach for it suddenly gets a little bit more of an appetite.
I think that's completely fair. So I was born in 85. What were you, 83, 82-ish?
81, old head.
81, okay. All right, so coaches at South Carolina and their records since Barton was born. I think it's a fairly relevant sample set. Jim Carlin, never heard of him, 45 and 36. Richard Bell went 4-7 in 1 year. Joe Morrison, 39-28. That was kind of a pretty golden era there for them. Sparky Woods, 24-28. Brad Scott, 23-32. Lou Holtz, 33-37. Steve Spurrier, 86-49. Sean Elliott, 1-5 on the interim basis. Will Muschamp, 28-30. This job, if you take it, is a job that's going to get you rich. It's going to set up your family to have generational wealth for years to come, because you're probably going to walk away with $30 million guaranteed money. But here's the deal. You're probably going to walk away and you're probably not going to win anything of significance. There's nothing in South Carolina's history that suggests you can win big at South Carolina. I like to play a game when evaluating the quality of jobs. And I like to think about, okay, if they're doing everything right and they're operating at peak efficiency and everybody else they play is too, just to kind of assume everybody's doing their very best, in how many games would they be favored on an annual basis? And when I play that game with South Carolina, underdog to Florida, underdog to Georgia, underdog to Tennessee, although I'm sure South Carolina fans would disagree. I don't really care. Their cross-divisional rival is A&M. They're going to be an annual underdog to A&M. So that's 4. Most likely the other team they catch from the West, they're going to be a dog to as well. I think the odds say. And then they're kind of on that level of Kentucky, Missouri. They'll usually be favored over Vanderbilt. So I really define South Carolina going 3-5 in the SEC as successful to me, as somebody who's not a South Carolina fan and not a South Carolina hater. I just say if they go 3-5, that's great. Good job, South Carolina. If they manage to go 4-4 in a given year, that's awesome. And that sounds depressing, and maybe it is for South Carolina fans, but I don't fault them in any way for firing Will Muschamp. If you have the cash to do it, or more importantly, if you're worried that you won't have the cash to do it, like you just said, because people who have pledged money all of a sudden aren't fulfilling those pledges, which has happened at some schools previously, which caused some coaches to get fired. If you got to make the move now, you got to make the move now. And man, how depressing it is if you just think, yeah, we're stuck with Will Muschamp forever. What did Will Muschamp do to get that job? Nothing. They just kind of assumed that he had some coaching ability that he couldn't recognize at Florida. He never had a good offense. Everybody agrees he's a great dude. And Ray Tanner, the baseball coach of South Carolina, turned AD, hired him. But I don't blame South Carolina fans for wanting him out at all. And I don't blame South Carolina for going out and trying to punch above their weight class. I hope they do go find somebody that's awesome.
It was a terrible hire. And that's not even meant as a knock on Muschamp. It's it sounds weird, but I'm not even saying he was bad. He was perfectly decent as a head coach at South Carolina. He wasn't good enough, but he was perfectly decent. He was kind of average. But the hire, retrospectively, when you think back on that hire, he had just got done failing at a program in the same division that's better equipped to be successful. And he's hired for a more difficult job in that same division. It doesn't make any sense to have gone and made that hire. And so I agree with what you're saying about sort of South Carolina's ceiling, South Carolina's median level of expectation, right? And yet I think because those expectations are what they are, because there is a ceiling on it, is probably in some ways why I'm okay making this move, because at some point, like, you have to decide, hey, like, we're striving to be better than this. We're not good enough. There is no indication that we're going to take a step. And you can you don't have to leave your state to find a program that is tiered up in a dramatic way. And so that's probably a problem here for Will Muschamp, for whoever's the head coach of South Carolina.
No doubt.
I mean, it obviously is. Like, you're being measured unfairly, though it might be, against Clemson right now, at least in some degree. And like, I understand the impulse and the inclination for a South Carolina fan to be like, look, man, get us somewhere closer. And I think it'd be one thing if we're sitting here and Florida and Georgia and I don't know, Kentucky, whoever, are like perennial playoff contenders. And I know Georgia is, but they've developed into that while Muschamp has been here. Like, Florida now is. They've developed into that since Muschamp has been there. Kentucky is not, but they've developed into a better program than Muschamp since Muschamp's been there. He's already sort of missed the window of like Tennessee sucking, Florida sucking, Georgia getting going, Vanderbilt being like this like SEC East doldrums are kind of over right now, especially when we're sitting here looking at Dan Mullen starting to tear up Florida the way he is this season. So this is like, it's only going to get worse from here. And like, on the surface with Will Muschamp, like, nothing you're really looking at. I mean, you can sort of distill it down to, all right, offense had never been there. Like, we need better offense. Ironically, like, I feel more confident in the direction of their offense right now with Mike Bobo and Colin Hill and Luke Doty and what they've got coming in, the way they're trying to recruit speed more at the receiver position. Like, there's a lot of things that lead me to believe that for the first time in maybe Muschamp's career, offensively, like, they may be making some smarter decisions. And yet, like, to this point, he has not shown any indication. He's not shown any reason to believe that this thing will change. And it's kind of interesting how quick you can drop off the cliff, because his first 3 years, 6-7, 9-4, and 7-6. Like, if you can sort of pace back and forth between that, like 6 to 9 wins, just like this, like pendulum swing of 6 to 9 wins, back and forth, you can probably tread water at South Carolina for a nice long clip. But you dip down to 4-8, and then you get to this year where you're 2-5, and you're getting some ugly losses in there. They're going to lose their patience real quick. So it's just, I think it was time.
I completely agree. It was time. I don't really think South Carolina is a job that should be included the 9 dash in the swing there, right? I think it's more of that kind of 5-7 to 8 dash.
I mean, they've been
9 is hard.
Like, are you saying like Steve Spurrier set like too lofty of expectations?
Absolutely, he did.
I mean, yes, that
is totally unrealistic.
3 straight years, which is sort of wild.
Yeah, and they've played football since 1892, and I think those are the only 2. I mean, you're talking about 2 out of 100. I don't know. Like, I just went back and looked. Since this program joined the SEC, let me give you a guess here. How many guys who coached South Carolina went on to ever become a head coach again anywhere?
I mean, I'm sitting here looking at the list. And
they joined in what, 70?
There's not a lot of names. There's not a lot of names that I've that have put together a strong resume beyond South Carolina.
All right. Well, the listeners at home have probably made their guess. It's 0. This is a dead end paycheck job. If you take this job, you're taking it for the check. And because you want to say you coach in the SEC, it's not a stepping stone job. Like, I mean, we have 50 years of this now, of this. And they like, what's the path for you to go get hired elsewhere out of this job? Hey, look, South Carolina's a really hard job, and I won 8 games a couple times. Like, you're gonna get a whole lot of money out of this, but Clemson as your annual non-conference game, and they also like to schedule difficult games out of conference, which is absolutely insane. Like, they're playing UNC in the non-conference some years in those neutral site games in Charlotte. I don't know. I am not super high on this as a job. So let's transition into guys. Yeah, like, I think it's a great job to get paid, and they have awesome fans and they have really nice facilities. So in theory, you should be able to win there, right?
But here, let me present the devil's advocate then.
All right.
All right. So they've been in the SEC since '92. All right. They've had
92. Excuse me.
So
their last conference championship was 69. I was looking at that when they left the ACC. Apologies.
No, yeah, all good. So since '92, they've had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 coaches if you don't include the interim, Sean Elliott. So 5 coaches. You got Sparky Woods as one of them. You got Brad Scott as one of them. You got Lou Holt, Steve Spurrier, and Will Muschamp. All right. So of those 5 coaches, could you not just make an argument here that they've failed on 3 hires and they've hit on 2? I mean, Lou Holtz, and that wasn't like a wildly successful regime, but like he went 8 wins and 9 wins. Steve Spurrier, we just talked about, he went 11 wins, like 3 times. I think, and I don't know, like, I'm not even necessarily presenting that I have, like, I feel like this is some like elite job. It's not, but I just sort of wonder, you mentioned 2 things they do have, like they have facilities and they have a fan base. Like, I remember, cause I'm from Nashville, and I remember in like the mid to late 90s, Vanderbilt was like the worst team in America. And South Carolina for a couple of those years wasn't a whole lot better. But when they were going like 1-10 under Brad Scott in 1998, like, I could be imagining this, but as I recall, like, there were still fans in those seats.
Oh yeah.
I mean, they were still like getting after it and going to those games. Like, that fan base is kind of surprisingly rabid. And so if you got support, if you've got facilities, if you got people that want to win within the administration, if you're within a footprint where you can bring in elite talent, do you think that in some way they have just been a program that has been underutilized, and that if you get a good hire in, the ceiling could perhaps raise significantly? I kind of wonder that. I'm not saying it's
possible. I do. If I'm taking this job, though, we'll get to candidates here in a second, because I think that's an interesting discussion as well. But if I'm taking this job, I need you to not schedule any Power 5 teams other than Clemson in my non-conference. I need you to guarantee me you're going to give me a chance to go 3-0 in my 3 non-Clemson games every year, right? I need you to understand that 5-7 is not a bad year at South Carolina. It's not my goal. But like, if I go 5-7, like, dude, I can go 5-7 and win a lot of the games I'm supposed to win more of the games that I'm supposed to win than not, and then still just lose the games that I'm the big underdog in, and be, splitting some of those other ones. I need those guaranteed wins, and they have not done that in recent memory. If you look at their scheduling, and I'm going to pull up their future schedules here. I remember taking a look at this a couple of years ago. I was like, what is South Carolina doing? Like, they could have decent teams and still have no shot. So the future schedule is actually not that terrible for the most part.
I can't really think of any. Like,
they have North Carolina in 23. Next year they actually have 3 cupcakes in Eastern Illinois, East Carolina, and Troy. So not cupcakes, those two, but like those are wins if you're doing your job. Georgia State, Charlotte, Wofford, those should be wins. 23, they get UNC. They've scheduled, a home and home with Miami in 2026. That's one I want to get out of. Like 26, 27, we're playing Miami. Like that's not great. That's 2 more losses on my schedule, most likely, even if I'm doing a good job, depending on what Miami does. But they need those guaranteed wins. There's not enough of them there at South Carolina, even if I'm doing a good job. But I think you're right, though, that some coach will be attracted to this because of facilities, because of the fan base, because of the recruiting footprint, although it's heavily shared with everybody else. And let's be real here. This is still I think probably a top 30 or top 35-ish job in college football because of the money, because you can have a staff, because there's only so many schools that can pay like this. Somebody's going to take this job and be really happy to get it.
All right. So where should they go? What's the, there's being some names thrown about. Let's just sort of run through a few of them. Like Hugh Freeze, Billy Napier, Scott Satterfield, Sarkisian, the Clemson coordinators, Will Healy at Charlotte, Jamie Chadwell, who's an in-state guy who's having success at Coastal, obviously. Any others out there that are being tossed about?
Monken at Army. Apparently, he was at Georgia Southern when the South Carolina president was there at Georgia Southern.
I think the South Carolina president came from
from Army, not Georgia Southern.
From Army, yeah.
Apologies.
Yeah.
There's some kind of Georgia Southern connection there too. I was reading about earlier, but I can't place it. So I guess we start at the top. Billy Napier. Guy is, he comes, he understands the Saban system. He's worked with Dabo, so he has a lot of experience with, both of those kind of coaching trees that have won national championships in recent years. He's done a really good job at Louisiana of recruiting and developing. I know you and I are both really big fans of the recruiting job that he's done there. They have a decent chance to, win a conference championship here in one of these coming years. They've played for it a couple times now, barely losing to App one year and losing a little bit bigger another year. They got a signature win this year, going on the road and beating a Big 12 team. I think this could be a decent fit. My question is, and he's an offensive guy, whereas Muschamp was not. Is he enough different? Like if you're South Carolina, are you scared? Like, is he too Saban-y? And I mean that in a negative way, but it also could be a positive. But like, you just had Muschamp. Do you worry that he's like too much off that same tree? Does that bother you if you're a Gamecock AD?
No, I think Billy Napier is. I cringe and I hesitate to say home run because who the hell knows? But I think he would be a great hire because of a lot of things you're saying. First of all, he's put together really effective and successful offenses at Louisiana and at Arizona State. He built those offenses like over the course of his career, like in his mind's eye. He's failed once already at Clemson. He's learned from that. He is a Nick Saban guy, but he is not a Nick Saban personality. Like, he has all the Nick Saban tricks that he has accumulated working under Nick Saban. And yet, like, when you talk to people that have played for him, coached with him, he's like Nick Saban with like the Dabo Sweeney. Nick Saban from a, recruiting and attention to detail and organization and a lot of that stuff. But he's Dabo Sweeney from like a quality of life, from a style of coaching, from a love them up sort of perspective. Like, so in a way, I think Billy Napier is this like a more modern coach with all of the old school, all the positives of like an old school coach still ingrained in him. And he played at Furman. He knows the area. He's coached at Clemson, obviously. And I do think it's not a small deal that like he's got, like, I don't know of another coach that has coached significantly under Nick Saban and Dabo Swinney.
No.
This is a guy that can evaluate, he can recruit, he can coach, and he can he can develop, and he can hire. Like he's hired a great staff at Louisiana. So much so that it's gotten poached a time or two in the last couple of years. Like, I know that that's the name that is like, it's not the sexiest name for a casual college football fan, but I think if you followed what he's done closely over the last like 4 years since he left Alabama, he would be a really strong hire, I think.
So last year, he declined to pursue opportunities at Mississippi State and Arkansas. Did he also decline Baylor, or was Baylor the one he wanted and didn't get?
I think Baylor. I think he wanted Baylor, and they went Aranda. But I think he turned down Mississippi State, or at least shunned their advances.
And apparently Arkansas as well, according to the Big Spur site, bigspur.com, which is our South Carolina 24/7 site. Be sure to check those guys out. They do really good work. So let me ask you this. Why would Napier take South Carolina if he wouldn't want to take Arkansas? Is it just the division?
Because it's in the SEC East for one, and he's been in Alabama,
right?
Like he knows what he's up against there. Like I remember having a interview with him for social distance, and I asked him about the Group of 5 playoffs. Like, hey, like, do you think that y'all should be in the playoffs? And he was like, man, I've played in those playoffs. Like, I've been in those games. I know what that's like. Probably not. Like, I think there should be a Group of 5 playoff or Group of 5 championship or something like that. So I think that I took that to mean like he understands the monster that is, the monster, like the mountain you're climbing in the SEC West. I think he would view it as the East being a more like goals being more achievable, A, and B, he played football at Furman. He coached at Clemson. Like, he knows that area. He is comfortable there. Like, that's home. And so I think it would just I think it would fit better than, say, going to like a Mississippi State or an Arkansas, both of which I think are programs that he would probably view as just more difficult to win.
And you know, he'd probably be right, to be honest. Like, I think you're favored in probably one more conference game per year if you take South Carolina as opposed to Mississippi State or Arkansas. And I mean, look, the difference between going 3-5 and 4-4 in the eyes of fans is pretty damn big. If for some reason Napier didn't get the job, and I think a lot of people seem to believe he's the favorite for the gig, and I don't disagree with you that from the South Carolina perspective, that's probably a home run. You know, if you're Napier, I do think you're probably looking a little worried, like, man, is this it? Like, if I take this job, could this be my last coaching stop, you know, given what's happened to everybody's coach there? But to your point, some of those guys have been older. You know, it may not be the dead end job that it looks like from the outside. But if they can get him, there's no doubt. Other names you mentioned that are interesting to me. I don't know that Scott Satterfield really would want to start over and get into that. Jamie Chadwell at Coastal, a guy that we've been very high on for a lot of this year. You know, I wonder, you know, I wonder if they'd be cool with like who he has on his staff, his recruiting connections, ability to play the game at that level. But there's no doubt the guy has coached really well. He also did a really nice job at Charleston Southern, which obviously, you know, a lot of ties there in the state. Joe Brady is nearby as well, doing OC work with the Carolina Panthers if they really want to shoot the moon. And
I don't get the Joe Brady thing.
Yeah.
I get why he's an appealing name, just from a sex appeal standpoint. Like, what, like the guy just put together, like he sort of like flipped LSU's offense on its head and created like the best offense in the history of college football. And so I understand that, but why do we have any reason to believe? Like, forget about the, like, first of all, I don't think he would ever come to like back to the SEC or the college football. Like, he's in a great spot. He's offensive coordinator of the Panthers.
Right.
But secondly, why do we even believe that he would be a great head coach. Maybe he would, but he's been a coordinator. He's not. He's been a
like
co-coordinator
an
once.
Yeah.
He's like, yeah. So it's like, what do I mean? I don't know. What are we talking about here? Like, we're just because he like is good at. He's because he's got some good stuff in his bag of tricks from schematic standpoint. Like he's going to be able to just run a program. Maybe, I mean, maybe he's like if he sits down in an interview, like he's got a great, like he's got his old like Ed Orgeron binder that he can like present all his like ideas for program building and sustaining and all that stuff. But like I'm just not. I don't really get that one. Anyways, go ahead.
No, I think that's actually pretty fair. All right, so Shane Beamer. He's
yeah. What's that? What's up with that one too? By the way,
so he was on. Like I'm just going down the list here. He was on Steve Spurrier's staff 2007 to 2010. I think they like him there. He did really good recruiting work for them when he was there in the latter part of that decade. He has a 1-0 record as a head coach because he coached them in the bowl game after the Elder Beamer was sidelined. Yeah, I don't really know about that one. Here's a name I'll throw out at left field, and you already mentioned Will Healy, so I'll let you talk about Healy. But what about Neil Brown? Neil Brown's doing a hell of a job in West Virginia, and yet it is still really hard to recruit at West Virginia, and you're always going to be on the razor's edge there in Morgantown, having to play in the Big 12. Not really near any kind of recruiting base. I mean, he's doing such a good job there, I think. Do you think he'd want to get back to the Southeast? Or is it a step down?
This is year 2
at
West Virginia. It's an interesting decision. That would be an interesting decision for him. Is South Carolina a better job than West Virginia?
What does West Virginia pay? I mean,
I don't know. I would guess he makes like $3.5 million, $3 million.
So South Carolina probably pays about $1 million more per. So it's not a huge jump. I mean, it's a jump, obviously. It's a jump that you and I would take, but ultimately, yeah. So I don't know. That's a good question.
Because here's what I'm thinking too is like, it strikes me. You're right. It's a little bit tricky to recruit to West Virginia in the Big 12, but it seems entirely more attainable to be a Big 12 champion than an SEC champion or even an SEC East champion at South Carolina. Don't you think? Can West Virginia, West Virginia is the climb of West Virginia over Oklahoma a more attainable climb than that of South Carolina over Georgia and Florida?
I think you have more teams to get to the top of the Big 12, but I don't think you have quite as many juggernauts. Although if Oklahoma
you have the same amount. You have Texas and Oklahoma.
Right.
And you got Georgia and Florida in the SEC.
Yeah. And you have A&M every year because that's your cross-divisional opponent too. And they're doing pretty well.
I'm with you on like the idea of him as being like a quality candidate. I'd be a believer in Neil Brown just about anywhere. But I'm not sure if it's worth that feels like a lateral move to me in some degrees.
Who's got a big game this weekend, Barton? Hugh Freeze.
I was gonna say, man, we're how long are we into this podcast? Like 30 minutes in. We haven't mentioned Hugh Freeze. Hey, listen, Hugh Freeze is, like I said, that Billy Napier is a home run. That would be a home run to me. I think Hugh Freeze is a home run, and I understand why. Like there would be hesitation. I understand why a certain type of athletic director, president, and Bob Caslen, the president at South Carolina, is like a former Army guy. And so maybe like the integrity question is unanswered there with Hugh Freeze is not like, isn't going to cut it. Ray Tanner, apparently, according to our birds and the South Carolina circle, doesn't like Hugh Freeze that much. Like there's stuff working against Hugh Freeze. But I'm just sitting here telling you, is there a coach you are more confident would be a good football coach. Get your team more talented, get your team more competitive, make you put you on equal footing in the SEC. I would be shocked if South Carolina hired Hugh Freeze and in 3 years they're 4-8. Shocked. Dumbfounded.
Because they'll score enough to not lose some of these shitty teams.
And conversely, if South Carolina hires Hugh Freeze and they're legitimately in the running for playing in Atlanta late in the year in year 3, I wouldn't be shocked. It would not surprise me. I don't know. Maybe my faith in Hugh is just, maybe I'm just getting caught up on this Liberty run. But Liberty really wasn't even supposed to be good this year. They lost a NFL guy. They lost their quarterback. They lost this was not even a team that returned a whole lot. And here they are, undefeated, 22nd in the country.
You raise a lot of really good points. A lot of really good points. One of the concerns with Hugh Freeze is not just the NCAA stuff. It's can administrators trust him? Because he wasn't honest with the people at Ole Miss, right? That's what they'll tell you is he wasn't straight with us. And you can be all fake preachy and whatnot in public, and you can do all that kind of stuff. And I think he certainly is that. But you need to be able to be square with the folks in your own building, and let them know kind of what's really going on. I don't mean the text and stuff. I mean the other NCAA stuff. And I think if you're an AD, that's going to give you pause, right? I need to know, you're my most important hire I'm going to make. You're going to run in many cases, the only business that makes money in our entire athletic department. I need to know you can be honest with me and straight up with me. If there's something going on, I need to know about it, right? That's, I think, what scares off a lot of people in the business from Hugh Freeze. It's not the other stuff. It's believe in his own tales and not being straight with people in the building. That's what I think pissed off Ole Miss people so bad. The NCAA troubles in its wake. Okay, whatever. But the honesty question is a big one.
What do you remember? What this is? I'd be impressed if you knew this. But who do you know? What athletic director hired Hugh Freeze? I don't. I'm asking. So this isn't like a pop quiz. I'm just curious.
I think it was actually when they had a committee, and it was Archie Manning.
Okay.
I think.
Here the point I'm was getting to is that I bet no one's pissed off at Archie Manning right now. No. I live in Nashville. There's a lot of Ole Miss people in this town. Some of my best friends are Ole Miss people. And what's universal among them is, hell, I'd do it again. That was fun. That Ole Miss tenure was fun. That Hugh Freeze tenure was fun. They don't give a rip that he, and I get it. This is coming totally from uninvested fan, an uninvested observer in me, these people don't have to answer, deal with the aftermath in a very, literal way. That an athletic director that hires Hugh Freeze and has to take on that baggage would have to deal with. But Ole Miss fans, I would just venture to guess 95% of them wouldn't change a thing about hiring Hugh Freeze, about how that all went down. They got to beat Alabama twice. Are you kidding me? That and so I'm just saying, man, when that's athletic directors. I'm talking to you guys, y'all are going to be judged by how, I don't know. I'm not, I guess I shouldn't even say that because I'm not, I just know from the fans, you're going to be judged. I don't know how the presidents, the board of trusts, all those folks, I don't know. Maybe
the fans are your shareholders though, dude. I mean, the fans are your shareholders. They're the ones who donate.
They want to win.
Yeah.
So,
and they want to have fun. Ole Miss won some games, but they were entertaining. Ultimately, this is an entertainment thing. Most people are not going to.
Lane Kiffin's got a long leash right now in Oxford because doesn't matter what it does matter what the record is, but he's putting together a pretty average season this year in a really extraordinary way, and people are going to be on board with that.
I agree. Could I see it at South Carolina? Yes. Do I think it's going to happen? Probably not, but I can't totally write it off. And if he goes there, I don't think I don't know that it would be a disaster. I mean, I think he could do something there.
But it feels like, oh man, it feels like to me that the Hugh Freeze thing ends at Auburn. It just feels like that's like just where this is heading. And I'm not saying this year. I'm just saying sooner or later, it just feels right for that to be where he lands.
I mean, God's Tigers. Dude, just Hugh Freeze recruiting on the plains. I mean, just
something, man.
Just green track that all the way. I was kind of hoping that he would go to Vandy because they don't have public records requests at a private school. But
we'll take him in Nashville.
All right, when we get back from this ad break, I want to touch on kind of a related topic and apply it to some different schools. Everybody sit tight. We'll be back in a second on Barton and Bud. All right, we're back. So, dude, we gave him like 40 minutes on the South Carolina job. And I love that about this show. Like we're not married to any kind of recap format. We can do whatever the hell we want basically. And if we want to deep dive something, we do it and just have a conversation on it. And if it's 40 minutes on the Gamecocks,
that's what's popping,
No doubt.
We talk about Cal UCLA on a Sunday, or we could talk about SEC just firing their first coach.
So did you catch that Cal UCLA game?
No, I didn't get a chance to.
I didn't either yet. Oh man. I don't know.
Sounds like Cal had a little bit of like the old like Navy. We haven't tackled in 2 weeks, so how are we supposed to how do we do this again? So I don't know how this Pac-12 season is going to be just total mess.
One of the reasons why I think it's justifiable to fire Will Muschamp is because he's having a terrible year this year, but it matches up with prior struggles that his team had in terms of just poor coaching, really poor game management at times. See also the game against Florida, and it's very consistent with what he had prior. And I think this is a important distinction to draw when we talk about two guys in Jim Harbaugh and James Franklin. Harbaugh and Franklin are both having terrible years. I mean, Penn State is 0-4, and we're 2 weeks removed from saying is Penn State the second best team in the Big Ten, despite their loss to Indiana. Given that we didn't know what Wisconsin was going to look like. They're now 0-4. And yes, I know that was a really improbable loss to Nebraska. If they play that game again, I'm absolutely picking Penn State after watching that. I mean, I don't think they could score that few points in the red zone if they tried. But I do think that this is a thing ADs are going to have to look at here. Harbaugh's team is struggling, and it's struggled the past few years. Not like, terrible. They haven't been awful teams, but just they don't seem to be moving in the right direction. For Penn State, they just went to a BCS bowl last year. It does seem like this is more of a blip. And I think if you're an AD, you really have to look at the direction of the program and the total picture. And if 2020 is very different than what you normally do, I think you have to be willing to dismiss it as a blip. So I think Penn State is probably more of a blip. I think PJ Fleck at Minnesota this year, with them being this bad, is probably more of a blip, although it wouldn't totally shock me if 2019 was a bit of a high watermark. But Harbaugh seems to be kind of a continuation of a downward spiral there at Michigan. And now he only has 1 year left on his contract. They kind of have to make a decision. Like, do you extend him and give him one of these kind of fake extensions where you don't really increase the buyout at all, just so you can say you have an extension for recruiting? Or does he decide to walk away? I'm interested in this and what happens here.
I'm curious. This is one of those in my little opening speech about it doesn't matter that this is a gimme year. That doesn't matter that this is the circumstances are weird. The record is what the record is. That said, I do wonder. Michigan is one of those teams. I wish I had their original record pulled up. Wish I had it in front of me somewhere.
Which record do you want?
just like the original, I'm sorry, not record, schedule, like what their 2020 schedule in a regular year was supposed to look like.
Got it.
Because what we're sitting here, and look, I don't have any misconceptions that they would have been they wouldn't have had a great year regardless. But the way this has played out, not having a spring for Joe Milton to really get his feet wet, missing a lot of the opportunity to grow in this offense, to grow in this defense, to build some confidence. Like, I just feel like it could have helped this team. But here we are, and it's 1-3, and it's a bad look. And I just think part of the problem with Harbaugh is the bads have looked so bad that it's just not not what you want to see. It doesn't engender any confidence in the trajectory of the future of the program. Like, it feels like when you hit your head on the ceiling at Michigan, like you're hitting it on like an iron ceiling. Like, you are not breaking through that thing. And when you drop down, like the basement's low. And so, yeah, like this is, meanwhile, like, yeah, I mean, I think James Franklin, there was the Michigan optimism is like a reluctant optimism. Like, heading into the season, you're like, oh, you know what? Like, God, this has got to be, they got to be good, right? Like, it's some of these days they got to be good. Whereas the Penn State optimism heading into this year was sort of I think the line graph, the data points to have demonstrated some sort of long-term upward slope. And this, to your point, is just a kind of an outlier season. And they do. I mean, the Maryland game was horrible, but aside from the Maryland game, they haven't looked bad. They've looked like they've had some serious holes in the product, especially like last weekend. Like you said, red zone. Like, there's a big major hole there. Taking care of the football, but it's not good. I'm not like defending them and saying they're like some sort of top 15 team that they got unlucky, but it's not as bad as like the 1-3 suggests, or the 0-4 suggests. I don't think.
Yeah, look, I think Penn State had one game where it legitimately quit, and that was Maryland. I think they had a really bad hangover game there against Maryland. And look, playing close and losing against Nebraska is not an accomplishment, but they were the better team in that game as far as moving the ball and stopping the opponent from moving the ball, which are the most repeatable skills that you could demonstrate. Everything else is a little bit more random. Not that there's not skill in being a good red zone defense or, good red zone offense. Obviously there is, and Penn State has lacked that skill in multiple games this year. But man, you're right. Like, it is how they look when you discuss Michigan. Like, when they lost on that punt block against Michigan State, it's like, how does this stuff happen to Michigan? And now there's no juice with that Michigan program. Like, remember when Harbaugh was set up with the satellite camps and everybody was talking about Michigan? I remember I went and covered, they had spring practice at IMG. Like, remember that, like 4 or 5 years ago now, that they went down there, and that was big. And Harbaugh was a total jerk to reporters, and everybody thought it was hilarious. And, what was it? One of the reporters asked him like something about like guys or the guys or the kids. And he's like, "You mean the men? Are men? Like, Michigan's not playing like men right now. They're not." I don't know what you do with this, though, because I'm not convinced that Michigan's gonna make a move here. It wouldn't shock me if they basically give a toothless extension on that contract and just say, okay, like, here, you have a 4-year contract, the buyout's not increased at all, just so you can continue to recruit. We'll evaluate you next year.
What if they just let the contract run out? Like, does that ever happen?
Well, there's 1 year left on it. I just for
know,
recruiting purposes.
But I'm just saying, yeah, no, whatever. I know, like, what if they just said, "Hey, man, you got 1 more year. Let's just play this out. See what happens next year. Hey, maybe you blow it out and you crush it, and then, hey, you may have an extension by mid-season." But I don't know, maybe they just say, "All right, another 8-4 season next year. Your contract's up. We're just not going to renew you. We're going to move on." Has that ever happened in college football?
I'm sure it has.
I'm sure it's happened in Group of Five. I can't think of a Power Five situation where they just sort of let the contract run out.
It's
they
almost
always feel this inclination, like as if like recruits are checking contracts before they commit somewhere. Like, oh, he didn't get an extension yet. I'm not going to commit quite yet. Talk to me when you get that extension. Or, oh, you're extended. Well, sign me up. Like, give me a break. Like, it's such a farce the way these contracts are always extended for no reason. Michigan should just be hey, it's a contract year next year. Do it in every other industry. Like, it's a contract year.
I'm 100% okay with Michigan just saying, all right, I'm going to give you a 20-year extension. No increased buyout. Like, okay, like buyout's the same. Great. You have recruiting security for here on out. If we want to fire you after next year, no problem with that. I did find their original schedule, by the way. And to your point,
talk to me about it.
If they did that could be like the loser leaves town match in wrestling, where it's like, all right, the loser's got to go out of this. Here we go. So Wisconsin, Penn State, at Washington, at Michigan State, at Minnesota, and Ohio State.
This was Michigan's original schedule?
Yeah, this is why, like, the Michigan's schedule did not get tougher after the redo.
It got easier.
Basically. They don't have to play Washington.
Hold on. That wasn't chronological.
No, but those are just the games that they would not be favored.
Okay. So here's all right. So back up. Do you have it chronological? Like, do you have the list of games in the order they would appear on the schedule? I got my Phil Steele upstairs. I should have grabbed that. Because my point partially was the idea that, I mean, anyone could make this excuse, but I mean, hell, like if you're just getting your feet wet a couple weeks, you get some of these kind of warm up games. I don't know. They had that at Minnesota and didn't help them much. I don't know. Maybe there is no excuse because they were bad on offense last night or Saturday.
Oh,
they were bad.
98 yards passing for Milton.
And they've been worse on defense. So I think the problem I have with Harbaugh as a head coach and why I do think it's time is because everything he's done has been very much, because you talked about the satellite camps and going to Europe and going to have spring practice at IMG, and it's all it's like all very much, we're going to do it as full speed as we can. We're going to make a splash. We're going to hire the biggest names we can find. We're going to steal this coach from this guy. I'm going to spend the night at the kicker's house. I'm recruiting. Like, it's all this stuff. But I can't really discern what the plan is. I can't really discern like when they're making, like what the meaningful, effective decisions that have been made are, or whether it's just, hey, we're going to live life full speed ahead, like hop on board and hang on tight. Like I kind of admire that approach. I just don't know if it's the best approach to run a football program of the magnitude that Michigan is.
I don't disagree at all. Let me ask you this. Would you rather be Michigan's AD or would you rather be USC's AD?
Oh, man, that's a tough one. I think, oh, man. Do you have an answer to that while I'm thinking about it? I'll give you one.
I literally just thought about the questions. I was like, I don't know, man. I mean, this is tough, right? Like, USC is 2-0. They easily could be 0-2 and have not looked good in either game.
Should be. Yeah, they got outplayed, really.
Yeah.
In both.
I mean, they could win the conference. I don't think they will win the conference, but like they will probably win the South.
I think I have my answer. I think, and it's crazy to say this because, like in some ways the answer is Michigan. Like it's just, Harbaugh's prickly. This thing is, I feel like the fan base is so over it at this point. Ohio State is so far gone in terms of competitive balance. And yet I think Michigan Harbaugh has been essentially successful. Not essentially, like by any definition, like he's been successful. And so, let's keep on rolling. Down year this year, a lot of issues. Let's get back to 10 wins next year, and we're good. With USC, I feel like you're missing a window here of competitiveness in the Pac-12 that might be tough to get back. Your recruiting is sinking year over year. Your roster is depleting. You'll have like you have underachieved from a talent perspective for the entirety of the Clay Helton tenure. And suddenly you've got like the Oregon starting to step up in the North. Like you still, like right now, you can still turn the car on and you're going to be the best team in the Pac-12 South and probably pretty good chance of being the best team in the Pac-12 period. But it's not going to be long before this thing atrophies enough to where you can't just turn it off and on like that. You might not be able to flip the switch. So I think I would cut bait before, like, I think that's pretty critical. I think that's essential that USC doesn't lose any more ground, because USC is too, it's too sweet of a deal. It's too sweet of a situation for them to, like, they should be the Ohio State of the Pac-12, and they still can't. If Michigan wants to be the Ohio State of the Big Ten, they got to beat Ohio State. And so that's why, to me, it's going to be a tough job for anybody.
I agree with that. I guess you have more cover to fire Harbaugh than you do Clay Helton.
You do. Right. I think in that sense, that's why I was sort of leaning Harbaugh, because I think it's an easier call to make, but I think the necessity of making the move is actually probably greater at USC.
I also think there are more guys who could succeed at USC than could succeed at Michigan. Right.
That's probably true also.
Yeah. Because with Harbaugh, you very much are left with the, like, how did this not work out feeling? I mean, this is Jim Harbaugh. Like,
right.
Michigan legend comes back. Like, he took a team to the Super Bowl. He took San Diego and made them relevant in their division. He made Stanford a thing when Stanford had not been worth a damn in UNI's lifetime. Like, he won all those places. He did all those great things, and he couldn't win here. Like, who the hell are we going to go get to go and beat Ohio State if Jim Harbaugh couldn't do it? Now, I think the answer is probably, a lot of people could take a shot at it. Maybe that guy is Matt Campbell. Maybe that guy is Luke Fickell. With USC, I guarantee you, if both USC and Michigan open, USC is getting a lot more calls. Like, if Penn State screws around with James Franklin, couldn't you see James Franklin saying, "Peace out, I'm taking my talents to LA"? No doubt.
Yeah. I mean, because that thing is such a machine from a recruiting standpoint, you don't have the cupboard stocked in no time. So if you get a hardcore recruiter, yeah. And so I think I agree. I think USC would have people banging on the door, and Michigan, it's got to be the right fit. And we start talking about it's got to be the right fit. And you're right. I mean, it's bizarre to think where this is positioned with Jim Harbaugh. It's shocking to put ourselves back in the time of the hiring and the inevitability of the success that was going to come. And now here we are. It's a very weird feeling.
Keep that in mind as we go through these new hires. Not you, but everybody out there. Like, there are hires we think are absolute slam dunks, and just there's no reason why this shouldn't work out, and they'll fail. And then there are hires that don't make that much sense, or that have obvious red flags, and somehow they turn out just fine. Like, hiring is not an exact science in any way.
Yep. No doubt. No, Sam Pittman, Mac Brown. I mean, the don't act like It's like, we're going to do the whole, like, a grade to hire stuff whenever the coaching carousel winds down. And we'll do it, and I like doing it, but I also have, I have no misconception. Like, unless I'm sitting in the interview room, unless I hear the pitch, unless I've talked to him about the way he plans on building the program, unless I know him personally, There's just no way to know. Now there are some coaches out there that I do know personally, and that I have tremendous confidence in, or a tremendous lack of confidence in, because of like what I do know. And if we're just judging these on the surface, on the resume, like, no, that's just not the way to do it. It's just not. You're just not going to get a good answer. A good, you're not going to be able to evaluate that.
So I think instead of letter grades, I want to use a no doubt, I could see it, or I don't get it scale this year. Because I feel like that's kind of what encapsulates this better,
I like that.
Like, all right, South Carolina against Napier. We're both going to say no doubt, yeah. Dude, we went an hour on South Carolina, Michigan, USC, Penn State.
I tell you, I mean, I think coaching carousel season is fun. I know we're like, it's people's livelihood that we're, volleying back and forth for entertainment, but it is, I think it's fascinating. There's so many angles to it. And, if we get a lively carousel, we'll have some good conversations.
And there's going to be ripple effects. Like some good assistant we know is going to get that Louisiana job if Napier gets South Carolina. If Hugh Freeze does get the South Carolina job, Liberty's shown they want to invest in football now. Like somebody's going to take the Liberty job. That job actually might be more attractive than it was a couple of years ago. Probably is. So there's always more stuff to talk about, and we'll do so again on the Wednesday show. Appreciate y'all listening.